Where does the idea of tragic love really begin? If you're thinking Romeo and Juliet, guess again. Centuries before Shakespeare, the Greeks told the story of Orpheus and Eurydice, a love so powerful it could charm the gods and even conquer death. But so fragile, it falls to pieces with one instant of doubt, leaving the haunting question of what might have been. When it comes to heartbreak, the ancient Greeks really know how to make us hurt. So who was Orpheus? Orpheus wasn't just your average mortal with a lyre. That's an ancient stringed instrument like a mini harp, if anyone else didn't know. He was the son of Calliope, the muse of epic poetry, and either a Thracian king named Eurydice or the god Apollo himself. If Apollo, god of light, music, and prophecy, was indeed his dad, that would explain Orpheus's lyre hero status. In fact, some accounts say Apollo personally handed Orpheus his first lyre. Thanks, Dad. From an early age, Orpheus had a superpower. Music so beautiful it could bend reality. Animals trotted over to listen. Trees leaned closer to hear better. Even stones, literal rocks, were said to shuffle around to get a good seat at the concert. Orpheus wasn't just a performer, he was a force of nature. Orpheus even shows up in other myths. When Jason and the Argonauts went off chasing the Golden Fleece, they brought Orpheus along, not to fight monsters, but outsing them. When the sirens tried to lure the crew to their deaths with their irresistible voices, Orpheus pulled out his lyre, nimbly plucked an irresistible harmony on the strings, and drowned out the voices of the sirens. Who says music can't save lives? Now what about Eurydice? Once he was done saving the Argonauts, guess what? Orpheus fell in love. His bride was Eurydice, often described as a dryad, a nature spirit in the form of a beautiful woman. Their marriage was, at least initially, a happy one. Virgil writes that all nature celebrated their union. Remember how Orpheus's music could even make the rocks and trees join the party? Well, they did. But as this is Greek mythology, happiness is just the setup for disaster. One day, while wandering through a meadow, Eurydice caught the eye of Aristaeus, a minor god associated with shepherding, honey, and beekeeping. Mesmerized by her beauty, he decided he'd very much like Eurydice for himself, and chased her through the grass. Eurydice ran, and in her flight she stepped on a snake. The bite was swift and fatal, and Eurydice was swept from her mortal coil to join the ranks of the dead in the Underworld. Orpheus was devastated, but rather than sitting and performing a tragic lamentation on his lyre, as we might expect, he decided death was no match for him. He took up his lyre, walked to the edge of the world, and descended into Hades, the realm of the dead, to get Eurydice back. First he met Charon, the irritable ferryman of the river Styx, who refused passage to anyone who wasn't dead. But Orpheus had brought his secret weapon. Orpheus played and sang, and Charon fell into a trance, ferrying him across the river. Safely over, Orpheus stood before the gates of the Underworld to find Cerberus, the monstrous three-headed dog, blocking his way. What do you think Orpheus did next? Maybe bested the dog in a brutal, nail-biting fight to the death? Nope. He plucked the strings of his majestic lyre and sung a sweet lullaby to the hellhound. And soon enough, the formidable foe was curled up like a tiny puppy after dinner time. Finally, Orpheus stood before Hades and Persephone, rulers of the Underworld. He sang of love and loss, of his grief, of the joy Eurydice had brought him, and the emptiness there was without her. In a surprising twist, Hades, god of the Underworld, was moved. Persephone too. They agreed Eurydice could return to the land of the living. But let's not make it too easy, with a catch. Eurydice would follow Orpheus up to the surface, but he must not look back at her until they were both fully out of the Underworld. It sounds simple, but remember, this is a myth. A rule like that exists so it can be broken. So, Orpheus began the long climb back. Behind him, he could just barely hear the footsteps of Eurydice. Step after step, the weight of suspense grew heavier. Was she really there? Or had Hades tricked him? Anyone feeling a teeny bit of sympathy for Orpheus yet? Finally, just as the sunlight broke above them, and Orpheus himself had stepped into the mortal world, he turned, whether from love, fear, or sheer impatience, we can only guess. For an instant, he saw Eurydice reaching towards him, and then, like a candle being extinguished in the breeze, she vanished back into the darkness, never to return. So what happened next? Orpheus was shattered by the experience. Some say he swore off the love of women entirely after that. Others say he roamed the earth, singing songs so sad that even the rivers wept. Eventually, he met his own violent end. It was recorded that Orpheus was torn to pieces by Maenads, the female followers of Dionysus, god of wine. Apparently, Dionysus was jealous because Orpheus preferred Apollo. In other versions, Orpheus simply rejects the Maenads' romantic advances, and they, naturally, respond with murderous fury. His severed head floated down a river, still singing, until it washed up on the island of Lesbos, where it continued to deliver prophecies. And his lyre? According to myth, the Muses placed it in the heavens as a constellation named Lyra. A beautiful, symbolic image of undying love and commitment, if you can ignore the slightly messy way he meets his end. So that's the basic myth. But what's the message? Well, the story is really a metaphor for love and loss. We can all recognise in the story the fragility of life, love, and the perhaps vain idea that we can control or influence death. But Orpheus is no role model. In Plato's Symposium, Phaedrus basically calls Orpheus out for being a bit of a coward. Yes, he journeyed through the underworld like a rock star hero, but according to Phaedrus, the mark of a true love is being ready to die for it. Orpheus tried to cheat death to get Eurydice back. Clever? Yes, but maybe a little selfish too. And don't forget turning back. That gaze isn't just dramatic flair. It objectifies Eurydice. If Orpheus had truly loved her, he wouldn't have needed to peek. He would have been ready to die to be with her and would have avoided one of the most heartbreaking fails in Greek mythology. The myth lives on. This myth's influence spans centuries. Medieval poets turned it into Sir Orfeo, a fairy tale style happy ending during the Renaissance. Monteverdi made Orpheus one of his first opera heroes, and Gluck's Orfeo ed Eurydice gave him a slightly happier finale. Modern artists haven't stopped either. John Cocteau cast him as a surreal poet, Black Orpheus set the tale in Rio's Carnival, and musicians from Nick Cave to Anais Mitchell keep reimagining the doomed lovers today. The Greeks might have framed it as a cautionary tale about obedience or trust, but we keep returning to it because it feels so real. Everyone has looked back when they shouldn't. Everyone knows the fear of losing somebody, and the wish that, with enough love or talent, you could bring somebody back. Orpheus couldn't, neither can we. And that's why this myth still feels so relevant for modern life.